I posted this tweet several years ago, how we were trying to move from DevOps to DevOps. And back then I was working in our professional services division with a lot of customers and trying to help them move along. And I've been a network management guy my entire career. My license plate and Twitter handle is SNMP guy, if that tells you anything. So, so this is just the space I love. And I know that you guys that have been doing DevOps for a long time, some of this is going to sound like, yeah, we're going to talk culture kind of stuff again, right? Maddie mentioned it earlier this morning, and I'm going to really amplify some of that. But maybe some of you snuck in here trying to learn a bit about DevOps, and some of this information is going to be equally applicable to you too. So how did we get here? Well, let me tell you, at least in the network industry, in the beginning was the CLI, and it was good, right? And network infrastructure folks loved the command line interface, right? If you couldn't type show something, it wasn't interesting to them, right? And for most of you, it looks like you're under 35 here. We had this protocol called Telnet that you would use to access a router or a switch. And this is actually even before access points, okay? And the thing with Telnet, it was unencrypted, right? And it was before SSH came along. So all those passwords, all those sessions and emails that were just out there on the network, people could run their little sniffer and capture what you were doing. And they were happy with that. But others did not agree that this was the right thing to do. And the clicker is not moving. There we go. So others thought about it not so much. Very good, right? And mostly these are like the cloud scale folks, right? The Amazons of the world, the Googles, Facebooks, and my buddy Jonathan's around here somewhere from AWS. How do folks think he did with his little Ignite talk? Good, good, cool. Appreciate him, getting to know him. So he didn't crash, that's good. But, you know, with that was an advent of software-defined networking, or SDN. Now this industry really stuck on what I call finger-defined networking, or FDN, right? Everything had to be typed in. And that just slowed us down so much. Now, I can tell you that SNMP was brought in. They thought, well, this will help us out a lot because we can programmatically use information from SNMP. And you can get a lot of operational data from it, but there's not a lot of ways of changing the environment through SNMP, not a lot of writable MIB objects, right? So this is some old school talk here. But that's how it is, unfortunately. And with some performance management tools, not the ones that you see out there in the hallway that are doing Kubernetes management, performance management through APIs, but a lot of the infrastructure stuff still does a lot of SNMP. Now, I'm glad we're moving the needle on the equipment to put a lot of streaming telemetry, gRPC, and that kind of stuff. But unfortunately, we still have people that are slow to respond to this capability that we're putting in the products. So, all the way back to 2017, here we have a vice president of Deutsche Telekom saying, we're using Stone Age tools while the internet companies have laser swords, and I prefer those to an axe. And we're like, yeah, automation orchestration's good. You need to do this, buddy, right? And we're glad that folks like you are here and you're moving that needle along. But we have to think about, and it's about that empathy thing, what are the reservations that people have to really embracing DevOps, right? Well, there's time. At least in the infrastructure side, Python, you know, it's pretty easy to understand, right? It's a good first starting programming language. But folks are like, you know, I really want to take a year to learn Python if it takes that long, right? We kind of joke about it. What about the prior investments? Well, my company's made all these prior investments and I don't really want to move around from that, right? Or, hey, I've got some issues with regulations. So some industries just have so much going on with them for auditing and such. Trust issues, right? Trust issues tend to happen with those early adopters. I tried something, nobody was there to help me. That trust fall happened and I just broke my head on the concrete, right? So when we see people that are having trust issues, you need to come alongside and say, hey, I'm here to help you. Let me understand what your use case is, explain it to me, and maybe I can really move you along. Hopefully the lack of awareness isn't much of an issue, but it can be. People just don't know the resources that are out there and available to them. And also, we have to admit there's disagreement, right? This is where I get to do my second impersonation. If you heard the Bernie one earlier, I got to do that. So anyway, so it's the Arnold Schwarzenegger talk to the hand, right? Anybody from California here? The great state of California? Nobody from California. You know, Arnold does DevOps too. It's not polymimetic, but it's polymorphism, okay? Invariably, you're going to run into people that just disagree with the direction you're going into. And that's when you have to make a good business decision. Are we going to, as we say in North Carolina, fish or cut bait, right? Because you have to throw in a fishing analogy in North Carolina. This is actually the first time I get to have a talk in North Carolina. I live here in a town called Apex, you know, peak of good living. But go all over the world, talk about other technology and networking and automation orchestration, DevOps, SDN, blah, blah, blah. And I like, all those North Carolina jokes would just fall flat. Here, people are like, ain't talking, right? He was like, he's not wrong. So anyway, so I'm super excited to be here and talk about. But lastly, the culture issue, right? And culture is huge. It really determines whether somebody is conducive to change. And sometimes we see, like in the industrial or defense industry, they have these ideas of zero defects and fail fast, and they really don't resonate with us in IT service management, right? So we have to think about that and give people space to fail, right? Because if they don't feel like they can fail, what are they going to do? They're not going to try to do anything, right? And you won't have any innovation happen. So how do we help? Well, first is what you saw on the prior slide. Let's seek to understand. Let's listen. Let's also think about having some empathy here. So this is starting to sound a little bit like marriage counseling. But I know my wife said that you cannot apply key performance indicators to me. So gathering tangible metrics to balance emotional responses is not going to apply in a marriage. But within an IT environment, yes, we should collect metrics that will help us make those decisions without a lot of conjecture and emotion. Pilots, proof of concepts, referenceable implementations. Your manager doesn't want to be the guinea pig, essentially, right? So let's do that. Now, how would this manifest itself? So I've had opportunities to work with many customers in a lot of different industries, and it's awesome because you can pick best practices from different ones and learn from many and apply it in a lot of different places. So one of those industries I love to talk about and investigate is electrical and nuclear power industries. And when we think about an electrical industry, that look at their power poles. So the one on the left there, if that's the type of customer in electrical utility that has these electrical disconnects that are manual and they have to send somebody out on a truck roll to use a power pole to disconnect around an outage, that's the type of customer that doesn't have the infrastructure that's ready to really embrace automation, right? The one on the right-hand side, where you see a little bit more equipment on the pole and even an antenna, those are the ones that have the automated recycling systems that can disconnect and reconnect and go around power outages. That type of customer in a utility, whether it's Duke Energy, Florida Power and Light, California Energy, and then up in New York, you've got Edison, right? These kind of companies now have the capability to look at automation in a new way, right? Well, how's another way to do that? Well, think about the utility meters that you have on the side of your house. Old utility meters, right? Analog, they would send somebody around your house. Hopefully your dog didn't get them. In North Carolina, that's a possibility. But they would take one metric off of that meter every month. And what was that metric? Kilowatt hours, right? What about the companies that started to embrace and use the 2009, what was it called actually? I had to write this down. The American Recovery and Reinvestment Act of 2009, $3.4 billion invested into utilities, right? So they started thinking, okay, this is where we can start to really build up our infrastructure, including are meters, right? And that's when you started seeing smart meters. Now we're starting to get into around 12 different metrics collected every 15 minutes and sent over a wireless mesh network, right? And now we have a 37,000-fold or 35,000-fold increase in metrics that this utility has available to them. So that first one on the left is getting 1 data point about you every month, 12 data points a year. They aren't going to be able to have the information to do deep analysis of how you use the energy or consumption. But the one on the right-hand side that's getting essentially 37,000 data points off you every month is going to be able to think about kilowatt hours, max, min, average, temperature, voltage, all these different things that are going to be useful to them. And how do they use it? To drive more sales to you, right? Or whether they need to think about, hey, it's time to turn Jason off because he's running a huge data center in his house. How many people love Raspberry Pis? I love Raspberry Pis. I do Raspberry Pis, ESP32s. I grabbed a whole bunch of them before they started going from $35 to $210, which I just looked at recently. I was like, Raspberry Pi 4, $210. I bought 5 of them to do a Kubernetes cluster so I could play around with Metal LB and really try to join together that developer cloud native community with the networking community, right? With Metal LB, you can do some OSPF and routing and all that good stuff. It's good stuff. All right, so what do we need to do? Well, we need to get back to the original intent of DevOps, right? Let's pair up our operations SMEs with our developer SMEs, all right, and create collaborative solutions. If we look back to essentially what Wikipedia says, it just reinforces that. It's about cultural change, right? As much as it is about tool chain, right? And we hear a lot about the tool chain, but I like to talk about the cultural change because, again, I think we have a pretty good idea about the tech side of it, and it's a little bit harder and squishy to talk about the personal part of it. And we heard some of this from Maddie's keynote earlier at the beginning. So when we're thinking about projects in network or cloud or application, what is it usually involving? APIs. So let's talk about those APIs. And for the people that are lagging, for them to notice that, hey, I've got a product here, whether it's infrastructure product or an application, it's got some telemetry and instrumentation I can extract from it. It's got APIs that I can go in and make changes of that environment. If you get them that understanding of how that works, REST APIs and streaming telemetry and Yang models, it gets a little bit above their head, right? So we can help them translate that information. I mentioned a little bit about Raspberry Pis. I love to do home automation. And some of my home automations, anybody use Shelly equipment for like electrical switches? They have, I purchased this stuff specifically because it'll go inside of a wall box and it has REST APIs and I can flick switches on and off from a REST API. It has a web interface. I decided rather than plugging something on the front, I could put it inside the panel or the gang box, and there's a huge wife acceptance factor of doing that. So anytime you think about IoT and you want to be able to turn devices on and off, pumps, lights, things like that, look at that Shelly equipment. It's pretty good. Now, for those folks that are just starting to get involved in APIs, they're still dragging their feet a little bit with automation, orchestration, DevOps. I'm going to tell you that I think low to no code is a really good place to start these folks for a lot of different reasons. Some people aren't ready to start with Python, infrastructure as code. They don't know what Ansible, Terraform, YAML, and they don't have a JSON body like I do, right? So we need to help them along. And these low to no code solutions allow you to grab something from a toolbox, drag it into a canvas, glue things together, and get a lot of benefit out of that. And it helps them extend and use the benefit of their domain expertise. So in my industry, some of these folks that are routing and switch experts that aren't really ready for Python are like, what can I do to keep sharing the best of what I know about routing protocols, but get a little bit closer to you, Jason, and you're a programmer kind of guy. And I said, well, let me show you a little bit about low to no code, right? And using some tools like Node-RED and N8N are some of my favorite ones, although Zapier is a good one. And where's my Jonathan friend from Amazon with their Honeycode? They've got a decent solution too. So something to think about there. And some of the technologies to introduce them to are just basic logic, conditionals, loops, how to do a REST API call, right? REST API call to this wireless controller or to this AWS EC2 instance, right? And then database calls, you got to store this information somewhere, right? And sometimes file operations. Now, why file operations? Because this is where you can do some really cheesy kind of like dashboard stuff, right? Grab some information, wrap some HTML code around it, throw it in a file, put it into an Apache post directory, and then boom, you've got a simple database or a dashboard. Let me show you one of those actually. So one of the things I get to do is help run our Cisco Live events in the US and Europe. And in the US, in 2019, the last time we had it in San Diego, we had 26,000 attendees. So there's a lot of network equipment, over 2,200 wireless access points to set up for 2 million square feet of conference space. Just incredible amount of equipment. Well, we had this product manager who was an expert with his solution called Cmx. And what Cmx is not important. The understanding of how we apply DevOps principles is important. But in case you're interested, Cmx is a location, a hyper-location aware capability, and it just pulls data from access points and allows you to triangulate where people are. Now we call it DNA spaces. Well, he knew his product. I didn't know his product, but I knew low to no code. I knew programming. So I said, let's sit down together and you tell me how you would troubleshoot or monitor this, right? And he told me the commands that he would do. And then I said, okay, cool. So here's pulling in a terminal connect node. Here's how to run the command. Here's how to extract the output, do some string manipulation, wrap some HTML around it because we know HTML is coding, right? Yeah, okay. And then throwing that on a file onto an Apache server. Boom, very simple. And people would say, Jason, the 90s called, they want their HTML 1.0 back. And I said, I'm sorry, but this is what they wanted, and this is what we did in 30 minutes. Do you want functionality or do you want glitz and glamour, right? Well, what happened next? They came by the next day and said, hey, could we enhance this, right? And that's being agile, right? So what they said is, could we change colors on the cells in case a process is down? I said, sure. You just tell me what that condition is, and we put that up there. Boom, here's a new dashboard. They came back the next day. Can you imagine what their request was for the next enhancement? Can you alert me when this dashboard changes colors? I'm like, okay, here we go, another 30 minutes. Now, Cisco is not a big user of Slack. Okay, so we use WebEx, and there's a WebEx chat utility, and it has a REST API, so we were able to just say, whenever this changes, send a REST API call to the endpoint for WebEx into a space or a chat room, and boom, they were able to be notified when that happened. So, I know I've mentioned Cisco a few times. It's not a hard sell. I'm sorry if it sounded like that. But I will sell this part, which is my team, developer relations. We have a developer.cisco.com website. And if you're starting early in your journey, you'll find good information here. If you're fairly well along and you're looking for more detailed information, this is a good resource too. We've got Postman collections. We've got links to Git repos. We're working a lot on API quality. So if you've engaged with Cisco before and you thought it was the trucks, that's good. If you've worked with Cisco before and you've been a little bit disenfranchised with some of the API quality, just let me know. I'm here to help. That's why we're representing today. So appreciate being able to be that bridge with the developer community as much as we can. All right. So what did we learn about this experience with utilities and with the Cmx customer? Well, it's about using the best of each other's skills and abilities. It's about being agile and DevOps minded, right? He has some skills, he or she has skills in a domain that I do not. I've got skills in programming and development and low to no code. And then they start to understand, they get the bug. Right? And that's the best thing, because if I have to go learn their domain experience, it's just the same problem as them having to learn coding and APIs and everything else, right? And do I really want to get into their domain expertise? Probably not, right? But when they catch the bug of low to no code, what I've noticed is they go out and they start building these fun little data collectors and configuration and provisioning engines, and then they come to me with this low to no code flow, and I say, well, it's self-documenting. Now I can tell you about how we can turn this into a Python script because it's been documented well because you execute it as a flow. And let me show you my friend Python async IO now, right? I don't start with jumping in hard with, you know, symmetric processing and all these other things. I can wean them into where we need them to be. Teach a person to fish, have some of those baby steps. The benefits, well, hopefully you get benefits of teamwork, motivation, and dedication to cause. I think all of us have run into situations where a team member or a customer is just not dedicated to the project and they start to check out. One of the Ignite talks, the lady that was showing some unicorn going out to LinkedIn or something, they check out, right? We need to prevent them from checking out. So as much as we have some empathy for their situation, tell me about your project, let me help you. We're going to have better teamwork and dedication to cause. Finally, again, listen, empathize, strategize. I want you to collaborate. I want you to consider these low to no code options. I've got some links here and a QR code. I didn't wear a hoodie, unfortunately. My marketing director said, you don't need to wear a hoodie. So that's it. So thank you very much for your time.